Fat girl cried, "Nobody could ever love this body." Mountain man said, "Let me show you how wrong you are." Moonlight spilled across the quiet frontier town, its silver glow stretching over the wooden boardwalks and dusty roads. The night should have been peaceful, but the echo of cruel laughter still rang in Isabel Hartwell's ears. Just hours earlier, in front of half the town, William Ashford, the man she had secretly cherished for years, had dropped to one knee. But the ring he held wasn't for her. It was for her best friend, Margaret. When Isabel's face fell, when her voice trembled in disbelief, William looked at her with cold disdain and said words sharp enough to scar her forever. "Be real, Izzy. A body like yours was never meant for love. You can't expect what other women have." The crowd chuckled, some even nodding, as if his cruelty were truth carved in stone. Isabel, cheeks burning, had run before the tears gave her away. Now she stood at the edge of Moonlight Lake, the dark water rippling beneath the weight of her despair. Her reflection wavered round face, soft shoulders, curves she had only ever been taught to despise. She whispered through her sobs, "No one could ever love this body. I am ugly, unwanted, unworthy." Her shoes slipped off. She stepped forward, the cold water licking her toes. One more step, and the pain would finally stop. But then a voice, deep and steady as the mountains themselves, broke the silence. "Don't do it," it said. "Please don't." Isabel spun around. From the shadows of the trees, a towering figure emerged, a man broad of shoulder, rough-hewn like the land itself, with eyes that glowed in the moonlight. Sebastian Blackwood, known only as the reclusive mountain man of Silverstone, had come down from the wilderness, and he wasn't about to let her slip away. The town of Ashford Crossing was no place for a woman like Isabel Hartwell. Narrow streets lined with saloons and general stores were filled with sharp eyes and sharper tongues. Every step Izzy took seemed to stir whispers. Too big, too plain, too unworthy. She had grown used to the stares, but never to the sting. Her family's bakery on Main Street was her only refuge, though even there the snide remarks followed. Men came for bread and biscuits, but left smirking, murmuring jokes about the baker's fat daughter. Women offered false smiles, then mocked her behind closed doors. Each day carved away another piece of her spirit. William Ashford had once been her dream. A rancher's son with golden hair and perfect posture, he had spoken kindly to her when they were children. She mistook politeness for affection, built her hopes on the fragile foundation of childhood memories. But the man who had knelt before Margaret in the square revealed the truth. He had never seen Izzy as anything but a punchline. His words, so cruel, so public, were a branding iron on her soul. That night, as the crowd laughed, a figure lingered in the shadows of the livery stable. He did not laugh. His tall frame leaned against the wooden beam, his arms crossed over a chest hardened by mountain winters. His name was Sebastian Blackwood, though most townsfolk only knew him as the recluse of Silverstone Ridge. Rumors painted him as dangerous, half wild, a man who had turned his back on civilization. But what the whispers never mentioned was the way his eyes softened when they followed Isabel through the marketplace. Sebastian had watched enough. He had seen her shoulders slump under the weight of mockery, had heard the venom in William Ashford's voice, and something inside him burned. He could not explain why her pain struck so deep, only that it did. Hours later, When he found her at the edge of Moonlight Lake, he understood what despair had driven her to. Her cry, "No one could ever love this body," cut through him sharper than any blade. That was when he stepped from the shadows, when his deep voice pleaded with her not to surrender. Now, standing in the moonlight, Isabel looked at him as though he were a phantom. "Why would you care?" she demanded, her voice raw with grief. "Because I do," Sebastian answered simply. His words carried no mockery, no judgment, only a steady conviction. The air between them hung heavy. Izzy's body trembled, half from the cold water, half from disbelief. Could it be true this man, this stranger who lived above the clouds, saw her worth when no one else did? Sebastian took one careful step closer, the moon glinting off the rough stubble of his jaw. "Come away from the water," he said, low and firm. "You don't belong there." Something in his tone, unyielding, protective, cut through the fog of her despair. For the first time all evening she hesitated, and in that hesitation the tide of her fate began to shift. The town had humiliated her, branded her unlovable. But before the night was through, the mountain man would make his choice clear. He would not let her drown in their cruelty. The night at Moonlight Lake had left Isabel shaken, her shoes damp, her heart heavy. She had not agreed to follow Sebastian, at least, not with words, but when he extended his rough, calloused hand, she placed hers in his as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His grip was steady, grounding her when the earth beneath her feet felt ready to collapse. "Come with me," he said, his tone leaving little room for argument, yet carrying no trace of command. It was not an order, but an offer, a lifeline. And so Izzy found herself walking beside the mountain man, away from the town that had laughed at her, away from the waters that had almost claimed her. The trail was steep, winding up into the silver shadows of Silverstone Ridge. The night air grew colder the higher they climbed, nipping at her skin, but Sebastian seemed impervious. He carried a lantern in one hand and a bundle of supplies over his shoulder. His strides were long and confident, while Izzy stumbled often, unused to the rocky paths. Each time her foot slipped, his arm shot out, catching her before she could fall. "You don't have to keep saving me," she whispered once, embarrassed. His answer was gruff, but not unkind. "I'll stop when you stop needing it." The silence between them was not awkward. It was filled with the sounds of night owls calling from the trees, the whisper of the wind, the crunch of boots on stone. For Izzy, every step away from Ashford Crossing was a step away from shame. Yet uncertainty gnawed at her. What awaited her at the top of this mountain? Why would a man like him care what became of her? They paused by a stream that glittered like liquid glass under the moonlight. Sebastian knelt, filling a tin cup with water and handing it to her. His fingers brushed hers, warm against the chill, and she felt a flutter in her chest she had not known in years. "Drink," he said. She obeyed, the cool water soothing her parched throat. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "I'm nothing to you." His eyes, dark and unreadable in the night, lingered on her face. "You're not nothing," he replied. "You're worth saving." The words hung between them, heavy, unbelievable, yet spoken with such certainty she could not dismiss them. By the time dawn painted the sky in streaks of rose and gold, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley. The town below was a speck, distant and small, while the wilderness around them stretched endless and untamed. Izzy drew her shawl tighter, shivering. Without a word, Sebastian shrugged off his heavy wool coat and draped it around her shoulders. It smelled faintly of pine and smoke, and the warmth enveloped her like an embrace. "You'll freeze without it," she protested. "I'm built for the cold," he muttered, as if the matter were closed. As they continued, the path narrowed, winding through thick evergreens. The sun climbed higher, warming the earth, and Izzy noticed things she had never paid attention to before. The sparkle of dew on needles, the sweet trill of a sparrow, the way light broke through branches like shards of glass. It was as though Sebastian's presence sharpened the world around her, making it vivid, alive. At midday, they stopped to rest. Sebastian unwrapped a loaf of bread and a wedge of cheese from his pack, breaking both in half and handing her the larger portion. She blinked. "This is more than half." "You need it more," he said simply, already chewing his smaller share. Izzy looked down at the food in her hands, tears pricking her eyes. It was such a small act, yet no man had ever offered her kindness without a hidden sneer. For the first time in memory, she felt seen not as a burden, not as a joke, but as a human being worth care. By the time the mountain cabin came into view, smoke curling gently from its chimney, Izzy's legs ached and her spirit trembled. She had left the world she knew behind. Ahead of her, nestled in the wilderness, waited something entirely different, a place where perhaps, just perhaps, she could begin again. And standing beside her, the silent, steady man who had pulled her from despair seemed to promise that this journey was only the beginning. Sebastian's cabin stood alone on a rise, timber walls weathered by years of storms, its roof patched with care, its windows glowing faintly from the fire within. To Isabel, it looked nothing like the polished homes of Ashford Crossing. It was rough, simple, and entirely alive. The moment she stepped inside, the scent of burning cedar wrapped around her like a blanket. The cabin was one large room with a loft above. A heavy wooden table sat near the hearth, its surface scarred by years of use. Shelves lined with jars of dried herbs and preserved fruit filled one wall. On another stood a sturdy bed of pine, covered in thick quilts. The space felt warm, lived and safe. "You'll stay here," Sebastian said, setting her bag near the fire. His voice was low, matter-of-fact, but Izzy caught the faintest hesitation in it, as though he feared she might refuse. "You mean I'm not going back?" she asked. He met her gaze, steady as stone. "Not unless you want to." Something in her chest loosened. For the first time since childhood, she felt she had a choice. That first night, Sebastian gave her the bed and made a pallet for himself near the fire. Izzy protested, but he silenced her with a shake of his head. "You've had enough cold," he said simply. As she lay beneath the quilts, warmth sinking into her bones, she listened to the crackle of the fire and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Sleep came easier than she expected. Morning in the mountains was crisp, the air so sharp it stung her lungs. Sebastian was already up, splitting logs outside with swift, practiced swings of his axe. His shirt clung to his broad shoulders, and Izzy quickly turned away, embarrassed by her own sudden awareness of him. She busied herself with the hearth, trying to be useful. When he came back inside, carrying wood stacked high in his arms, he paused at the sight of her attempting to stir the fire. "You don't have to," he said. "I want to," she answered firmly. For too long she had been treated as incapable, as if her size made her clumsy and useless. Here, She wanted to prove otherwise. A flicker of something approval, perhaps, crossed his face. "Then I'll show you the right way." So began the rhythm of their days. Sebastian taught her how to tend the fire, how to fetch water from the stream, how to mend a broken handle with twine. She, in turn, baked bread in his hearth, her hands remembering the motions from her family's bakery. The smell filled the cabin, and when Sebastian bit into the first loaf, he closed his eyes briefly, as if savoring more than just food. "You have a gift," he murmured. She flushed, unused to such praise. "It's just bread." "It's more than that," he countered quietly. Little kindnesses marked the passing weeks. He always let her eat first. He carried the heavier loads without complaint. When a storm rolled in one night, rattling the shutters, he checked on her twice to make sure she wasn't afraid. Each act was simple, wordless, yet each chipped away at the armor of shame she had built around herself. One evening, while she sewed a tear in her shawl, Sebastian sat across from her, carving wood. His hands were rough, but the small figure he shaped a sparrow mid-flight was delicate, alive. He set it on the table between them. "For you," he said. She lifted it carefully, tracing the smooth wings with her fingertips. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "So are you," he replied without looking up. Her breath caught. No man had ever said those words to her, not without mockery. She searched his face, but found only sincerity. The fire crackled, her heart hammered, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Yet life in the mountains was not only tenderness, it was also labor. The roof leaked after heavy rain, and Sebastian showed her how to patch it with tar and shingles. Chickens had to be fed, snow shoveled from the path, wood chopped before winter. Izzy's hands blistered, her muscles ached, but with each task she completed, a small spark of pride grew inside her. One afternoon, after she managed to split a log cleanly with the axe, Sebastian grinned an unguarded, rare grin that lit his rugged face. "You're stronger than you think," he told her. For once, she believed it. At night, by the fire, they spoke of the past. Izzy confessed the cruelty of the town, the words that had driven her to the lake. Sebastian listened silently, his eyes burning with quiet fury. When she faltered, he reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "They were blind," he said, "blind to what's right in front of them." "And what's that?" she asked softly. "You," he answered. Her throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes. In his cabin, surrounded by wood smoke and the gentle rhythm of life, Isabel Hartwell began to see herself not as the fat girl mocked in town, but as a woman worth protecting, worth cherishing. And though neither of them spoke the word yet, love was already blooming quiet, steady, unstoppable, as sure as the fire that warmed them each night. The weeks passed quietly in the cabin, each day weaving Isabel and Sebastian closer together. She was no longer the broken girl from Moonlight Lake. Her laughter returned in small bursts, her steps more confident, her eyes less clouded with shame. Yet peace in the mountains was never meant to last. It began with the rumors. A trader came through one afternoon, stopping to barter for bread and preserves. As he loaded his mule, he cast a glance at Izzy, then at Sebastian. "Word in town is that Hartwell girl ran off with the recluse," he said with a smirk. "Some folks say he stole her. Sheriff's been asking questions." Izzy froze, her heart lurching. Stole her! The trader's words echoed the cruel whispers she had tried to escape. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "That'll be enough," he said curtly, sending the man on his way. But after the trader disappeared down the trail, Izzy turned to him, fear and doubt creeping into her chest. "They think you took me," she whispered. "I don't give a damn what they think," Sebastian growled, his eyes flashing. Then, more softly, "Do you?" She hesitated, torn between the love she was beginning to feel and the fear of the world's judgment. Before she could answer, another shadow fell between them, her father. Mr. Hartwell arrived 3 days later, riding up the mountain with 2 deputies at his side. He was not a kind man. Years of bitterness had carved lines into his face. He stormed into the clearing, pointing a finger at Sebastian. "You've shamed my family enough," he spat. "Hand her over." Izzy stepped outside, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. "Father, don't you speak," he snapped. "You've embarrassed us, running off like some wanton girl. And you—" He turned on Sebastian. "What kind of man hides a woman away in the woods? You'll answer to the law." Sebastian stood tall, calm, but unyielding. "She's here by choice," he said evenly. "No man drags her anywhere." Izzy's father sneered. "Choice? What choice does a fat, desperate girl have? You preyed on her weakness. I won't allow it." The words cut deep, reopening wounds Izzy thought had begun to heal. But before despair could swallow her, Sebastian stepped closer, his voice steel. "You will not speak of her like that. Not here, not in front of me." For the first time in her life, someone defended her openly, without shame, without condition. Izzy's chest swelled with both fear and pride. That night, after her father and the deputies retreated to camp, Izzy sat by the fire, trembling. "Maybe he's right," she said softly. "Maybe I am just desperate. Maybe you only took pity on me." Sebastian turned from the flames, his face shadowed, but his eyes burning. "Is that truly what you believe? After all this time? After every moment we've shared?" She looked down, tears dripping onto her hands. "I don't know what to believe. I've been told my whole life I'm unworthy." He crossed the room, kneeling before her, so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "Then hear me now, Isabel Hartwell. You are not unworthy. You are not weak. And I did not bring you here out of pity. I brought you here because I couldn't bear to watch the world break something so rare, so beautiful." Her breath caught, a sob escaping her lips. For a moment, she believed him. For a moment, she felt whole. But the conflict was far from over. The sheriff arrived the next morning, summoned by her father. He was a man known more for bribes than justice, and he eyed Sebastian's cabin with greedy calculation. "Reckon there's land rights tangled up in this," he drawled. "Silverstone Ridge belongs to the town, and this here shack sits square on prime hunting ground. Maybe we'll just take both the land and the girl back." Sebastian's hand drifted toward the rifle by the door, his jaw set. Izzy, heart pounding, realized this was no longer about whispers or shame. This was about survival. The mountain had given her peace, had given her love, but now it demanded courage. And for the first time, she knew she would stand beside Sebastian, no matter the cost. The sheriff's words hung in the mountain air, thick with threat. Izzy's father smirked beside him, certain the law and the weight of public judgment were on his side. 2 deputies shifted uneasily, their hands resting on their revolvers. Sebastian stood in the doorway of the cabin, broad shoulders blocking the entrance, rifle in hand, but not yet raised. His voice was calm, but every syllable carried iron. "You're not taking her, not this land." The sheriff spat in the dirt. "You planning to fight the law, Blackwood? 1 man against 4? "Not 1 man," Izzy said suddenly. Her voice trembled, but she stepped forward until she stood at Sebastian's side. Her shawl slipped from her shoulders, revealing the woman she was becoming, no longer the girl cowering in shame. "You'll have to go through me, too." Her father's eyes widened, fury burning. "Isabel, you shame us all over again. Don't you see? No decent man will ever—" "Enough!" Izzy's voice cracked like a whip. For the first time in her life, she silenced him. "I've been called fat, ugly, worthless my whole life, but this man—" She reached for Sebastian's hand, gripping it tight. "He sees me. He loves me, and I will not crawl back to a world that despises me." The deputies exchanged uncertain glances. The sheriff scowled, his bluff unraveling. "Big words, girl, but words don't change the law." Sebastian's rifle lifted, steady as the mountain itself. His tone dropped to a low growl. "The law's been bought and twisted in town. Up here, there's only right and wrong, and if you cross this line, you'll regret it." For a long, charged moment, the clearing was silent, but for the wind through the pines. The deputies shifted again, one lowering his hand from his gun, the other muttering that this wasn't worth dying for. The sheriff cursed under his breath, realizing his men wouldn't stand with him. He spat once more in the dirt, glaring at Sebastian. "This ain't over," he hissed, before jerking his head for the others to follow. Her father lingered, his face twisted with rage. But when Izzy met his gaze no longer with fear, but with steel, he faltered. For the first time, she wasn't his to command. Without a word, he mounted his horse and rode away. The moment they were gone, Izzy's knees buckled. Sebastian caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her, shielding her from the fading echoes of confrontation. "You were brave," he whispered against her hair. "Braver than you know." She clung to him, tears streaming down her face, not tears of shame, but of release. She had stood, she had spoken, and with him beside her, she felt unbreakable. That night, the cabin glowed brighter than ever. The fire in the hearth snapped and hissed, throwing golden light over the rough-hewn walls. Outside, the mountain lay in silence, cleansed by the day's storm of voices and threats. Izzy sat at the wooden table, her shawl once more around her shoulders, her hand resting in Sebastian's. The world outside still wanted to tear her down, but here, in this small haven of timber and stone, she was safe. Sebastian leaned closer, his voice a rumble softened by tenderness. "You're safe here. As long as you'll have it, this is your home." Her chest tightened, her eyes filling with tears. Not tears of sorrow this time, but of belonging. "Home," she whispered, tasting the word like something she had never truly known until now. He smiled, rare and fleeting, but enough to warm her more than any fire. "You fought harder than most people ever will. The world may never understand, but I do, and I'll keep standing with you." Izzy turned her gaze to the fire, its light flickering like a promise. For so long she had believed her body made her unworthy of love. Now she saw herself through his eyes, strong, beautiful, deserving. The wind rattled the shutters, a reminder that storms would always come. Her father, the sheriff, the townsfolk, they would not forget so easily. Yet when she looked at Sebastian, steady as the mountain itself, hope surged in her heart. She leaned against him, whispering softly, "Then let's face them together." And though neither of them could know what trials lay ahead, the cabin stood as a sanctuary of love and defiance, its warm light glowing against the endless dark. Every story leaves a mark, but this one carries a truth many of us need to hear. Love is not about fitting into society's narrow mold. It's about being seen, cherished, and defended for who we are. If Izzy's journey touched you, I'd love to know. Where are you listening from tonight? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you still believe in the power of love to heal and transform, don't wander too far. The next story waiting for you will carry that same light.